Hello, and welcome back to our weekly live updates and Q&A about what's happening in our society and in politics. You might let me know if the audio is okay, if you can hear me, because last week we had to cut it short because nobody could hear me. What's the point of that? So just give us a thumbs up if you can. Sounds like you can, which is good. What I wanted to talk about today, obviously answer people's questions, but then have a particular focus on the cuts to SNAs that became a big story last week. The government has partially backtracked, but we need to force them to backtrack fully and properly invest in education and in education for kids with additional needs. Well, Paul, any chance of, one second, let me open up your comment, of altering the camera angle? The light is reflecting off your bulb. Are you talking about my head? I suspect you're talking about my head. That's clever. The SNAs, and then secondly, the issue of the bill that we have coming up, not this week, but next week, but we're campaigning for it this week, for a ban on the toxic social media algorithms, turning them off by default for everybody and turning them off permanently for under 18s. So that's what I want to focus on today and answer any questions you have. People presumably saw the big scandal last week where it emerged that more and more schools were being told that the amount of SNAs that they have were being cut. Government came under significant pressure. People were rightly outraged about it. And then the government announced a pause. It's strange, like the whole notion of a pause doesn't really make sense, because what they were talking about and what Mio Martin made a big deal of in the Dáil, when it's obvious what they were saying, these aren't coming into effect anyway until September of next year. And they're not saying to schools got a letter saying you're losing your SNAs. They're actually not saying you're not losing your SNAs in September. They're now saying, oh, we're not certain that you're losing your SNAs. We got to think about it some more. We're basically going to do a review of it. So it reflected the fact that the government was under very, very significant pressure on the issue because of parents, because of SNAs, because of people speaking up about it. But the pause is not good enough. The cuts need to be reversed. We have a very, very wealthy country. We have a government that is willing to give 300 million euros in tax cuts to Google in the last budget. This is extra on top of what they normally get. Another 300 million or so to developers in terms of tax breaks. Another few hundred million to fast food giants. And yet is cutting SNAs from schools and kids that desperately need them. Contact us there, DB, about if you have a particular case. There's an excellent campaign called Education Equality that fights for appropriate school places for all children that we've been involved in helping. So we could hopefully try and highlight that. But basically, the government came under massive pressure. They're currently pausing it. We need to force them to reverse the cuts entirely. There's a protest organised by a whole group of different parents this Wednesday, 5 o'clock outside the Dáil. There's also protests happening right across the country. If you look at my Facebook page, you'll see a list of different events happening across the country. So hopefully there'll be one somewhere near you. Get along to it if you can, to try and turn a pause into a complete reversal of the cuts. I mean, the whole government approach to this has been deeply cynical. They tried to blame it on communication, trying to blame it on the NCSE, the National Council for Special Education. They tried to suggest that this is kind of a big surprise and we don't know where it came from, and that doesn't make any sense. This is the outworking of government policy. There's an excellent series of substacks by Ciara Riley on this issue, precisely highlighting how this is the outworking of a policy decision in 2024 about on what basis are SNAs allocated. And it's been really narrowed, the base on which you can get an SNA, basically to only being like physical need. Effectively, SNAs are being turned into something like healthcare assistance and all the usual reasons you'd have for an SNA of kids not being able to cope in a busy classroom, kids who have autism, kids who are in other ways neurodivergent. Those are by themselves are no longer adequate reasons to get an SNA. So all the ways that SNAs help make our classrooms tick, make them operate, make children of all, different levels and abilities and capacities, all able to learn together. SNAs are the people who really help that make to help that happen, and they're being stripped out. And like fundamentally, it's a move away from inclusion, which they pay lip service to, towards exclusion. That's what it's pointing towards. So you will then have kids having to go into special classes who could have been in mainstream classes if there were sufficient SNAs in mainstream, and instead they're going to have to go into special classes. There are definitely kids who need to go into special classes, and we've been campaigning for special classes in every school across the state. There's also kids who need to go to special schools. But the basic, supposed goal, which all the evidence suggests is the best thing to do, is as much inclusion in mainstream as possible. SNAs play a crucial role in that, and the government is getting that, is moving away from that very dramatically. Now is the moment to push them back on that move from a model of inclusion, or which is meant to be pointing towards inclusion, to a model of exclusion. Just one comment came in there. What's the delay with the Occupied Territories Bill? What's the government excuse? We need sanctions on Israel now. 100%. The excuse is, we're waiting for more. We've gone back to the Attorney General, waiting for more advice. It's just an excuse. I mean, the real reason is they want this to go away. They don't want to do anything to offend Trump. Particularly, they don't want to do anything to offend Trump before St. Patrick's Day, but probably after St. Patrick's Day either. I wasn't at it myself, but there was a big protest for Palestine on Saturday. That should help to bring pressure to bear on the government, and that's what we need to do, definitely. The other thing I kind of wanted to focus on is our bill to turn off the toxic algorithms on social media. To explain what that is that's the fact that you go to a shop, buy a phone now, a blank phone. Don't give it any personal information except, say, you're a young man who's 16, or say you're a young woman who's 16. The algorithm, the TikTok, YouTube in particular, but also the others, within minutes of you opening up an account and not giving any more information, not liking any videos, will bombard you with certain types of messaging. So if you're a young woman, it'll bombard you with material advertising promoting eating disorders. It's incredible. I couldn't really believe it when I heard it. It is a multi-100 million euro dollar industry on Instagram, the promotion of eating disorders. If you search something about a diet, well, then most of your feed is going to be this pro-eating disorder stuff. Horrendous. It's what they think will get people's eyes watching the screen for the longest time. They can maximize the amount of advertising they sell. If you're a young man, you will be inundated, before you like anything, you will be inundated with toxic, manosphere, sexist, misogynistic material, the likes of Andrew Tate and other hateful material. You didn't choose to get this. It's being rammed down your throat. Our bill, which is called for by all the experts in this area, is about turning off these toxic algorithms. Turn them off by default for everybody, including adults. If adults choose that you want these algorithms to dictate what you get to see, as opposed to you get to choose yourself, you get to curate your own social media feed by saying what you like, okay, fine, you can turn it back on. But protect children from this by turning it off for all under 18s. That's what our bill would do. It's not clear so far what the government is going to do about it. Like, the government last week was talking, we kind of leaked out that they were going to ban social media for under 16s. And this is about being kind of hard, looking as if they're doing something big and meaningful. Oh, we're going to ban social media for under 16s. While not actually dealing with the fundamental problem. Like, I drew the comparison on the radio. It's like you have a park where there's lots of good things happening, a lot of social behaviour, people connecting with their friends, but there's also dangerous, harmful, antisocial things happening in the park. And instead of trying to make the park safe, you just put up a little sign and a small little wall around the park saying, no under 16s allowed. And then you wash your hands of it and you say, well, that's that sorted. Sure, we said young people can't be in there. So if they're in there, that's their own problem, or their parents' problem. If they jump over the wall, which the equivalent electronically is they just use a VPN to access social media from somewhere else. It's a way of them pretending they've done something about it while fundamentally doing nothing, as opposed to doing what's necessary, which is turning off the toxic algorithms. The other problem with this is that there's big privacy concerns. There was articles a couple of months ago of the government promising to stamp out anonymous social media accounts. And I think that's horrendous, the idea that people wouldn't be allowed to be anonymous online. It's a serious incursion into people's privacy, serious incursion into people's civil liberties. The idea that they're going to match up the MyGov ID system with the big tech giants is quite scary. What was interesting is when we launched the bill, there was originally an article in the Irish Examiner which said the government won't oppose it. But I don't know where it came from because the government hadn't met in the meantime since we launched it. So I don't know how that, and there was no quote. Then I was on the radio speaking against the idea of a ban on under 16s and in favour of dealing with the turning off the toxic algorithms against the Fine Gael TD Barry Ward. And it was very interesting what he said. It was on David McCullough, the 10 o'clock show, I think on last Wednesday, I think, or Thursday actually. I'm just looking through what he was saying there now. He said, this is the key thing he said. He said, you don't want to turn off the algorithms altogether. What you need to do is reform the algorithm. He says, if you turn off the social media algorithm, social media doesn't work. It's just not true. I mean, I think I drew the distinction on the program between, X, on Twitter, there's a following, that's the people you've chosen to follow, right? You've chosen to follow them. You're creating your own feed versus the For You, which they try and push you towards, which is the algorithm saying what you want. Facebook. I mean, when Facebook started, when we had MySpace, we are choosing to be connected to our friends, and then we get to see what our friends are seeing. Instead, an increasing amount of what you see on Facebook is now stuff suggesting that you should follow someone, and which is again is often hateful material. Or obviously TikTok or YouTube Shorts is very, very driven by the algorithm. We don't need the algorithm for social media to work in the way that people envisaged it was meant to work, which is connecting with each other, learning about things we want to learn about, and so on. Give me your questions there. I see a few people saying they'll have questions. And the other thing, just to say, in terms of what Barry Ward was saying, is that he didn't seem to understand that, he was saying people will be able to get around it. Our ban on toxic algorithms. I mean, firstly, people don't want to have toxic algorithms. They don't want to have this material force fed at us. Our bill doesn't pretend to, doesn't suggest that it's going to censor any material whatsoever. No matter how horrific the material you're thinking of, we're not going to censor it. The point is that it's not force fed down people's throats by these algorithms. And it doesn't make any sense that someone would try to get around, use a VPN to get around a restriction on these algorithms. People don't go on social media to have algorithms dictate what they see. They go on social media, connect with friends, and so on. DBZ at about 30-ish. Do I think a 5% minimum seat threshold for the Dáil would be good? No. I don't. As in, I think our current electoral system, PRSTV, is actually a relatively good system. I wouldn't be against the national list system, but I do think our current system is good. And then, with whatever votes you need to get elected, you win. You get one of the top 5 seats in a 5-seater, 5 positions in a 5-seater constituency, and you get elected. I think is reasonably fair. National Ambulance Service strike. I hadn't seen the National Ambulance Service strike. I've been involved in supporting previous National Ambulance Service strikes, so I'm sure I will support this, but somehow this has not been on my mind. I see here SIP2 to ballot members in National Ambulance Service up to strike action, so I'll go and find out more about that. I'm sure the workers are absolutely right. I've not considered a week. What's your the people who said you have a question? Put in your questions. And come here. Sorry, I'll just check on it. Anything that happens on social media is not happening because it's good for you, good for your physical or mental health, good for your connections. It's happening because it's the thing that the company thinks will make most profit. That's the whole logic, and that's fundamentally wrong. Fundamentally, big social media companies should be in public hands, democratically controlled, and used as public spaces. Dave Bryn says, what you're saying, Paul, is that you're right and we should just listen to politicians. No, do not listen to politicians. That's my main recommendation. Get involved in a movement from below of ordinary people. Do not trust politicians. Was people for profit stance on the SNA issue in Ireland? I was just talking about that for the first half. Come to the protest, 5 o'clock Wednesday outside the Dáil. We need to turn the government's retreat, the pause, into a full-fledged retreat to reverse on the cuts, but also reverse on the 2024 policy, which pushes a different model of SNA allocation. What's going to happen when the crash comes and government spending can't be funded? Well, then the government is going to use the so-called rainy day funds to bail out whichever sector of capitalism goes down. They'll use that money to bail them out, and then they'll impose austerity. How do I know that that'll happen? Because that's what they did last time, and it's very likely they'll do the same thing again. Exactly, Harry. Don't trust all Fine Gael are now left, albeit slightly. Do you agree? I do not agree. They're very right-wing. They're not racist right-wing. You know, they're not far right, but they're right-wing. We've had a right-wing government our whole existence of an Irish state. They're like classically right-wing, so-called centre-right parties. Is it possible to decentralise power in Ireland and give local councils power again? It should be. Yeah, that is absolutely. We should do that. 100%. Ireland is one of the most centralised countries in Europe, certainly, with the least power to councils. They've almost no power in reality. Yeah. And the power that councils has, they're almost, very few of those powers are in the hands of elected councillors. Like, really, it's a joke. It's held by unelected managers. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Kelly, finish the next election. Hopefully Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael are finished in the next election. I have increasing confidence that that can happen. Yeah. All right. Well, just Owen O'Neill, the council shouldn't have power because they're absolutely terrible. I mean, that's probably true. You're a local, sure, that's why they transfer power to them. They're unelected. They're very far away. You know what I mean? But the same applies locally, I think. I think we should try and empower councils, and then we should try and get left-wing councils. If I got into power, what I want to do? Loads of things. The main thing, not the main thing. One thing, I'll just mention one thing is we need a state construction company to build homes. The whole government policy is a disaster on housing. It's well over 10 years now we've been suffering from a housing crisis. It gets worse and worse and worse. The direction they're currently going is going to make it worse and worse. There literally is government policy to increase people's rents faster than they're already increasing. It's literally their policy. Supposedly, though, then to attract more investment, and that'll ultimately bring prices down. It's crazy stuff. They're throwing money at developers and landlords and tax breaks of various sorts, as opposed to use public money to deliver social and affordable housing. Would people for profit get rid of the Dublin Airport passenger cap? No, we would not. I think it is madness in terms of the environment as well as in terms of local people. All right, this has been good engagement. I gotta go off and do some other work. Thanks, everybody. I shall be back next week, all being good. Yeah, have a good week. Don't forget, 2 protests